But I think together, because basically what I try and do is just ask questions. And I think together we can maybe weave some wisdom. But what I'll be largely doing in this presentation is asking some questions, and mostly about coaching competencies. So, as someone who's been involved in developing coaching competencies, what am I going to do? I'm going to have a quick and dirty review of the literature, and it's going to be very quick and very dirty. Noticing some aspects of competency frameworks that are out there, and then look at what are the pros and cons of the whole competency framework world, and then finish off with some questions to ponder in our discussion later on. So I'll try and be very quick. So what's a competency? McClelland defined it as a personal characteristic, motive, behavior, skill, or knowledge that is proven to drive superior job performance. So the question becomes, what drives superior job performance in coaching? Well, what does the literature say? When I went through it to look at this, the empirical evidence for competencies is very, very weak, as Melvin has pointed out. I wasn't able to find a single experimental or randomized controlled study of coaching competencies. What I did find are a whole bunch of different frameworks and a different sort of qualitative studies, but really what they are is mostly at the level of collated opinion. You get a whole bunch of experts together and you say, well, what are the competencies? And then that becomes a competency framework. Yeah. Very rarely are there even studies that involve coaching clients. So here's an example. K.A. Horne in 2008 looked at 72 managers as coaches from the Eastern Cape in South Africa, and gave them a questionnaire asking them to rate which of these 11 competencies was most important for them. And this is what they came up with. Right? Now, no one could really argue with those as competencies. But what do they really mean? Maxwell in 2016 used a bigger sort of sample. He got a bunch of 17 experts to review 39 competencies using a modified Delphi model. And the experts reached consensus on 17 of those competencies in the first round. But the third round, 14 of the experts, who were the ones left, couldn't reach consensus on any of the remaining 22 competencies. And it's really interesting to look at some of those competencies that these people were sort of judging. These are the ones that they thought were genuine competencies, business experience. Sorry, can people read that? It gets even smaller later. Right? Working knowledge of coaching frameworks, self-confidence, trustworthiness, and so on. Right? But what about the ability to conduct a 360-degree review? Would you consider that to be a coaching competency? Or is that a 360 review competency? The ones they couldn't reach consensus on were things like formal training in psychology, experience as a business executive, experience facilitating organizational change, understanding of psychological theories. According to these people, that's not a coaching competency. Knowledge of personality, ability to apply models of human motivation. That's an interesting omission, isn't it? Yeah. Knowledge of adult learning theories and so on. When we look at the ICF or EMCC or other coaching frameworks, a lot of these things are in there. Okay, so what are some of the frameworks currently in use? I haven't included the ICF framework here because I assume most of you people know it, and I daren't start speaking to the ICF framework in front of all you ICF people. So EMCC, their framework, their competencies are seen in 6 levels, 2 of the foundation levels, 1 intermediate, 2 practitioner, and 1 master practitioner. And each level has the following groupings: competencies around beliefs and attitudes, competencies around self, communication skills, technical skills, and so on. Right? And this leads to quite a big competency framework. I haven't included it there. The one that I've been involved in developing is the Standards Australia Coaching and Organisations Competency Framework. And we break it up very differently. We look at generic coaching competencies and the supporting knowledge bases that are with them. And there are 4 types of skills within the generic coaching competencies. They're foundational micro skills, conceptual and technical skills. So foundational micro skills are things like questioning, reflective listening, etc. Being able to manage the coaching engagement. Conceptual and technical skills, these are things like case conceptualization, the ability to understand what's going on for people, ability to understand adult development and so on. Self-management and development skills, these are all about how you manage yourself within the coaching engagement and how you develop as a coach. And finally, boundary management skills, which are about managing the actual relationships associated in the coaching engagement. So that's the generic stuff, but we also go on to talk about different types of coaching that have additional skills associated with them. So in any given coaching engagement, you're likely to have at least 4 types of coaching. So coaching to develop skills. You might need to help a client develop a skill. And that has certain competencies associated with it, depending on the skills. Performance coaching, which is about using the skills that they have to be able to hit performance targets. Developmental coaching, which is about helping them take a different perspective on their world. And finally, remedial coaching. So the analogy that we use in the Standards Australia Handbook is of the cup. In skills coaching, we're getting something into the cup so it can be used. In performance coaching, we're using what's in the cup more effectively. In remedial coaching, we're helping the person fix cracks in the cup, things that are getting in the way. And finally, in developmental coaching, we're growing the size of the cup. So that's the Standards Australia approach. Here's an example of it. You don't need to read this, but that's the generic coaching competencies, 1 page of them. There's a couple of pages. And then these are the additional core competencies required for the different types of coaching. And of course, other types of coaching like transition coaching, etc., will have other core competencies. So what's the summary of all this? There's very little rigorously conducted research into what makes a competent coach. And that's worth pondering, I think. What's problematic about that, it provides little or no guidance for coach training. What do we teach coaches if we don't have really clear competency frameworks? But the other thing that I think is really important here, and this is the thing I'd like us to discuss most, is that all of the current frameworks have embedded in them a whole bunch of assumptions. Right? For instance, that coaching is about individual change. It's an interesting assumption, isn't it? That what changes is the individual. There are other models of change that work at the interpersonal level and also at the systemic level. And so do the competencies about change, about working with individuals for change, also hold when we talk about systemic coaching? The other thing that I think is going on in these different models is that it really replicates the fragmentation of the industry. That different groups have got different approaches to coaching and see coaching at different sort of levels, if you like. So I wonder, is that a good thing or is that not? So what's good about it, it provides room for multiple understandings of coaching, that fragmentation. And it enables coaching to continue to adapt because it has so many different elements to it, to the ongoing needs of the modern world, if you like. See, one of the areas that I think is becoming more and more important is a movement away from just coaching individuals to enhance their performance towards helping organizations see the direction that they're moving and whether or not that's a useful thing for the world. It's also good that it does reflect the state of the industry. So, just to finish things off, what should research look like in this area? What assumptions are we bringing to the table about what coaching is and what it should be and how it works? And I think that would be a really interesting discussion for us to have. And then how do competency frameworks then shape the industry? Because all of these competency frameworks, they're stories that we tell ourselves about what it means to be a good coach. And like every story, some stories enable certain things to happen and they disable other things. So what do our stories, our competency frameworks enable and disable? What do they enable? What do they constrain?